Hey guys, I know I've been gone for a while, but don't worry, I'm doing fine and classes are going well. The reason for the slow updates was due to me not enjoying making content as much as I used to. And I didn't want that to be reflected on my videos, so I decided to take a break just to get my head back in the game. But I really appreciate all the support you've given me, and rest assured that Phase 7 is still in progress. But I wanted to get a quick video out for you guys. And this is a idea that's kind of interested me for some time. I'm sure that most of us are aware that back in the 90s, Marvel went bankrupt and as a result they were forced to sell the rights of most of their characters. But I wanted to use this video to delve into maybe what if DC were the company with the rights issues, meaning they had to sell most of their popular characters such as Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Flash, etc. Now, as a result of this idea, this would mean that in this universe, the Batman movie and the Superman movie wouldn't exist, as well as their sequels. And so the idea I'll be discussing in this video is what if DC had sold the rights to Batman and his characters to Sony? And I would reckon that they would do this since even without the movies, Batman was considered to be one of, if not the most popular heroes of the time, and even to this day. So it would make sense that Sony would want to profit off the character's success. Starting with the release of Batman in 2002. And now that I think about it, Sam Raimi did always say that he wanted to direct a Batman film. So in this universe, he would finally get his chance. You're welcome, Sam. The actor that I have in mind to play Batman would be Christian Bale, as even in this alternate universe, I'm pretty sure he would have been the most popular choice given his portrayal of Patrick Bateman, as well as his other performances. The villain of this movie would be Willem Dafoe's Joker, and I'd have Harvey Dent fill in the best friend role of Bruce Wayne. I was having a little bit of trouble thinking of the main love interest until I ultimately decided to go with Vicky Vale. Alfred would also be in this movie, as well as Commissioner Gordon, played by J.K. Simmons. The movie would end with Joker somehow killing himself and Bruce rejecting Vicky's love confession as he feels that it is his duty to protect Gotham and be Batman. Bros just like me. Due to the success of this film, Sony would waste no time in producing a sequel, which would be Batman 2, released in 2004. The villain of this movie would be Mr. Freeze, as I feel like he could capture the portrayal of the tragic villain that got caught in a freak accident, which resulted in his wife being harmed in the process, like Dr. Octopus. However, the actor that I have in mind to portray Mr. Freeze would be Voldemort himself, Ralph Fiennes, who I feel like would kill it in this role. The movie would end with Mr. Freeze realizing the error of his ways and sacrificing himself to save Gotham. Bruce and Vicky would get together by the end, and Harvey would be set up as a villain in a sequel. Due to the commercial and critical success of both Batman movies, Sony would be 2-0 and would feel unstoppable, releasing Batman 3 in 2007, a movie which would unfortunately fall short due to studio interference as well as a lack of a coherent narrative. The villains of this film would be Clayface, Two-Face, and Bane. I couldn't really think of a symbiote equivalent of the Batman universe, so I was thinking that instead of the black suit, Batman could get addicted to a formula called Venom, which would eventually cause him to lash out and not act like himself. However, due to 3 villains as well as clashing of storylines, the movie would ultimately bomb, causing Batman 4 to be cancelled and Sony opting to reboot the franchise. And so they would, with The Dark Knight releasing in 2012. Whereas the past Batman movies were more lighthearted, this would be a darker retelling of Bruce's origins, with the plot heavily focusing on his parents as well as his relationship with others. The actor to play Batman in this reboot would be Ben Affleck, with the villain of this movie being Dr. Kirk Langstrom, aka Man-Bat. Batman wouldn't have a love interest in these movies, but will instead have a sidekick, which would be Jason Todd, which I know isn't entirely comic accurate, but I feel like Jason's character would really shine well in these types of movies. Jason would be about 16 to 17, and I'd have him be played by Dacre Montgomery. The movie would end with Batman and Robin stopping Man-Bat from turning the people of Gotham into mutated bat creatures. The movie would be met with mixed receptions, but it would give Sony the confidence to produce a sequel, which would come in the form of The Dark Knight 2, released in 2014. The villains of this movie would be Joker in place of the Green Goblin and Killer Croc in place of the Rhino. Elektra was trickier to replace until I ultimately came with the decision to use Poison Ivy, an elemental villain who was once looked down upon by society and is now using their newfound power to wreak havoc on those who treated them like trash. Batman would eventually defeat Poison Ivy, but Joker would end up killing Robin, in which Batman would also beat Joker, but he would quit as a result of Jason's death. This would last up until the end, where Killer Croc would be wreaking havoc upon the streets of Gotham, where a young man named Tim Drake would step up wearing a rudimentary costume, ready to fight the monster. But before Killer Croc could swing at him, Batman would ultimately end up saving the boy. However, the screen would cut before we could see Batman versus Killer Croc. This movie was supposed to be the stepping stone to a larger cinematic universe, but due to its poor performance at the box office, Sony would end up scrapping these ideas and ultimately share the Batman character with DC and Warner Bros., in which Batman would get recasted as Robert Pattinson, and he would get 3 movies as well as participate in many Justice League films, and he would also have a 4th movie set to release in 2026. The first movie would be more grounded, with the villain being the Riddler. However, the sequel would take a more fantastical approach, with the main villain being Scarecrow. And the 3rd movie would only up the fantasy, now involving the multiverse, where we would see Christian Bale's Batman as well as Ben Affleck's Batman team up with Robert Pattinson's Batman to take down the multiversal villains, such as Willem Dafoe's Joker, Poison Ivy, Mr. Freeze, Clayface, and Man-Bat. In between these films, Sony would also release an animated project called Batman Beyond in 2018, which would be a major critical and commercial success, leading them to later create a sequel. But before that, Sony would try to crack at creating a Batman movie centered around one of his villains, which would end up being Bane, released in 2018. But for some reason, Batman does not appear in this movie. The movie would get mixed receptions, but Sony would be opted to make a sequel, which would be Bane, Let There Be Chaos, where the main villain would be Zsasz. And this movie would also receive mixed receptions. Sony then, for some reason, would continue this trend, creating Dracula in 2022. A movie that would be the foundation for a truckload of memes. But on a more positive side of things, Batman Beyond 2 would release in 2023. However, its sequel would be delayed until later of 2027 due to studio issues, leaving fans on one hell of a cliffhanger, as well as more movies focused on Batman characters that no one asked for, such as Batwoman, released in 2024, a movie centered around Thomas and Martha Wayne, and it is set before the birth of Bruce Wayne, where Batwoman, aka Kate Kane, is the main lead, joined by the other birds of prey, such as Huntress, Black Canary, and Renee Montoya. However, the movie would undoubtedly bomb and would be met with backlash from critics and fans alike. Sony would then later release Deathstroke the Terminator, which would also bomb and not be very good. It would be a poor telling of Slade Wilson's origins and would feature Killer Croc as one of the antagonists. Black Mask would also feature in a cameo by the end. So far, the last movie released would be Bane: The Last Fight, which would also be met with varying reviews. And now here we are in the present day, where both Sony and Warner Bros. Are currently sharing the rights of Batman, and the character would have a movie set to release in July of 2026, which would feature characters such as Flash and Peacemaker. And well, that would be my take on if Sony had bought the rights to Batman. Please let me know what you guys think, and let me know your suggestions down below in the comments. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.